Hey guys, welcome to another movie review. Today I'm talking about the new Marvel film, Thor Love and Thunder. This is the fourth entry in the Thor franchise for the Marvel Universe. Basically, in this movie, you guys, we follow Thor after the events of Avengers Endgame. He's living on Earth as this with this new Asgard that they developed in Earth, and he has the Guardians of the Galaxy with him, and things are going great. Things kind of start to get bad again, though, when both Thor and the Guardians of the Galaxy find out that there is a guy named Gorr the God Butcher going around, killing off gods, really just brutally killing off all these people that are important to our universe. And so basically, Thor wants to put a stop to this once and for all. He gets back into shape because he's still overweight from the events of Avengers Endgame. So he loses the weight, tries to track down Gorr the God Butcher, but while all that is happening, he finds out that there is a Lady Thor as well. And not only is there a Lady Thor, it happens to be one of his former girlfriends. Him and Jane Foster broke up in the events of Thor Ragnarok, or at least in conversation it was brought up that way in that movie. So we now find Jane Foster, who's trying to battle cancer. And basically, her way of getting out of cancer temporarily is to become Lady Thor. With Thor now having a new weapon from the events of Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame, he has his own weapon, and now Lady Thor basically has Thor's former weapon and makes the weapon her own and things like that. And over the course of this film, both Thor and Lady Thor have to take out Gorr the God Butcher before he goes too far. But overall, guys, I enjoyed Thor Love and Thunder. I know right now it's getting really mixed opinions online. There's people who really, really love it and people who really don't like it. I'm kind of more along the line of people who liked it. I actually think I think it's better than okay. I think it actually is a good movie. I'm one of those people too where I think Thor Ragnarok's probably the best we've ever seen Thor. It had the right balance of humor and drama. It wasn't too serious, wasn't too comedic. It was just kind of right in the right balance, right in the middle. I also really enjoyed the first Thor movie by Kenneth Branagh from 2011. I think those are kind of the two times we've saw Thor at the best of his powers, the best of he's ever been written on a page for a script. Um, so those two in particular are the Thor films I kind of look up to the most. Obviously, Thor: The Dark World, like a lot of people, was not my favorite. I enjoyed it for what it was. It's not a great movie. It's definitely not a film I go back to very often. I think Thor: Love and Thunder is light years better than Thor: The Dark World, of course. Um, but it's one of those films where I can see why people were frustrated with it. There is a couple things about it that I wasn't too happy with either. But overall, I think it is a good film. It's a film I would recommend seeing, especially if you're a Thor fan or a Marvel fan. So there are some things in my positives and negatives that definitely affect why I like the movie, but why it's definitely not the best Thor film we've ever gotten. I think Thor Ragnarok still has that title, and then obviously Thor from 2011 has the second ranking in that too. So for my positives and negatives of this movie, you guys, um, I really liked what Taika Waititi did in that Thor Ragnarok movie. He came back to direct this movie as well, and he just has a sense of energy and charisma to him as far as a director goes that really shows in his films. He definitely just has a way of making everything feel happy and colorful and energetic and full of charisma. Whether it is a scene dealing with Thor or Jane Foster or his former friends like Sif or the Guardians of the Galaxy that show up in this movie. Um, he just has a way of energetically telling you everything you need to know about the story. He has a way of bringing information to the screen that is interesting and colorful and pops off the screen, is charismatic, and just the way the guy directs, I think, is extremely interesting. Whether it is a low budget film, how he started, or it is a big budget film like this one, where it's Thor battling gods and Thor going out and going into these visual effects heavy places. And the man just knows how to direct a film, and I just really like how he does it. He also wrote this film as well. So whatever Taika Waititi did to get the energy and the charisma to do this movie, I think both writing and directing this movie, it really paid off. It is probably my favorite part of this movie is Taika Waititi's energy in it. And that goes to my next positive point. There really is some great visual effects in this film. There's a scene where Thor and Lady Thor and Valkyrie and basically his whole gang of friends are trying to get help from Zeus. And when they walk into the kingdom, it really does feel like this big magical place that exists somewhere in the heavens out there, and is just full of life, full of buildings, full of people living inside of it for years. And just the way that they made it look felt very magical and mystical. It really, even though this is a fantasy film and clearly that's a fantasy setting, the way the film presents it to you really does feel like a place that you could go out and see somewhere that's just absolutely beautiful. So visual effects team, I know they're getting a lot of crap right now. I know there's been stories leaking online of VFX artists that are just getting overworked with Marvel. But hey, whatever they did to get Thor Love and Thunder done, to make the deadline, to make the release date, it paid off. You can tell the visual effects are just extremely well done in this movie. Then that goes to my next positive point. Christian Bale as Gorr the God Butcher. I've been a big Christian Bale fan my whole life. I loved him in the Dark Knight trilogy and in American Psycho, and the list goes on. The man's been in tons of films that I love. But he really is very good in this movie. He really is very threatening as this villain. Definitely a nice turn from Batman. Definitely a more villainous take from him that we don't really get to see very often. He's usually playing like the good guys, or if he is playing the bad guy, it's more along the line of like a Patrick Bateman from American Psycho. But the way he balanced it in this movie, I thought was good. You can definitely tell his tragic backstory. You can tell how he was frustrated with the gods. You can tell how he has a very toxic view of the gods based on things that happened to him early on in the movie. You just feel sorry for the guy. You just feel sorry that he went down the dark path that he did. So it's one of those villains where he's not just the bad guy to be the bad guy. He's not just the guy that Thor has to stop at the end of the movie. There really is a story behind him. There really is a motivation behind him for why he's doing what he's doing. Even though it's bad, even though it's evil, even though it's the very worst possible way to handle his motivation that he has. You know the guy's backstory. They jump right into it when the film begins. And I thought Christian Bale did a great job as Gorr the God Butcher. I understood everything that was going on in the guy's brain, even if it was evil and all that stuff. So the fact that I was able to understand where the villain was coming from, I thought was well handled in the script. There's some returning characters that I'm going to try to be careful with this compliment just so it doesn't spoil anything. But there are characters that are returning from the Thor franchise from earlier films. Some of them I don't think we haven't even seen since Thor the Dark World. Some of them are very brief. Some of them are in the film for quite a while. But we do see some returning Thor characters that we haven't seen in a while. So if you missed some of them in Thor Ragnarok, they are back in this movie, whether they were just in the first or second movie. They returned for this movie, and it's great to see some of them. Some of them, like I said, are very, very brief. You only get to see them for a very little bit in the movie. But the fact that we got to see them return, know that they're still in the Thor franchise in some way, shape, or form, it was very breathtaking and very nice to me. So it was great to see some returning characters that I loved over the course of the franchise return for this movie. And once again, the film is very funny. There's a lot of scenes that I'm going to cover in my negatives that don't quite work. But Taika Waititi knows how to make a good comedy. He knows how to set up a good laugh, set up a good time. He knows how to have the right tone in his movies. And there are some jokes that are pretty funny in this movie. I think the comedy does get a little overboard after a while, and like I said, I'll cover that in my negatives. But for the most part, when it's funny, there are parts that actually are legitimately funny to laugh at. And then, last and foremost, Thor and Jane's relationship is very well handled in this film. I actually don't get why people were crapping on their relationship in earlier movies. I've enjoyed their relationship this whole time, whether it is Thor understanding Earth or Jane understanding the heavens and the gods and all that stuff. Since the first Thor film, I've been invested in their relationship. So I think that's something that this franchise in general has handled very well. Taika Waititi, I think, understands the relationship. So if you didn't like it in the past, I think he handles it really well, where you kind of really understand now where he's coming from. So I bought into it. I bought into the whole Thor and Jane kind of rekindling their relationship and trying to make it work again. But for my negatives of Thor, Thor Love and Thunder, the film does go into full parody mode at times. There's just a lot of times where it's just a joke after joke after joke, and there's just a lot of scenes where It doesn't feel like it's taking itself seriously enough. There's just a lot of scenes where I feel like I'm watching a parody of Thor rather than a continuation of the franchise. And I don't know if that's the vibe that Marvel really probably wanted for this movie. So I think they just could have toned down the comedy a little bit, found the balance a little bit better the way Thor Ragnarok did it, and just not go full on comedy. I think that just wasn't the right way to go. Another thing I really didn't like about the film was Russell Crowe as Zeus. And I love Russell Crowe. It's cool to see Russell Crowe in a Marvel movie. I just didn't like the way he played Zeus in this movie. I don't know if he was directed that way, if that's the way he chose to play the character. I don't know why they made him gain the weight that they made him gain. He looked a lot heavier than what I normally see Russell Crowe being like. I also don't get. I saw in the end credits. Why did he have to have a dialect coach? Why did they? I mean, it's Russell Crowe. The man will know what to do when you ask him to use an accent or to use a voice or to. So that part was really kind of frustrating me. It's like they went out and found a dialect coach for a really talented actor who probably just could have done just as fine without one. Um, I just didn't like the way he played Zeus. He just seemed like a big buffoon that does not look like the kind of guy you would look up to if you were a thunder god or whatever. So just everything about that character, I did not like how he was written in the movie. We got Russell Crowe in a Marvel film, and I just didn't like the way they let him do the role. I didn't like it. And some jokes do get really old after a while. There's a joke involving some screaming goats that really is not very funny after a while. It's fine if you want to use it once or twice. Okay, fine. You get the screaming goat joke, but when it happens for a seventh time, when it happens for an eighth time, when it happens for a ninth time, it's just like, okay, I get it. You like screaming goats. So I thought stuff like that was really kind of old after a while. So there's a lot of jokes where they kind of repeat it after a while. There's also another joke where people keep getting bags of chips from the vending machine for Jane, and it's just like, okay, use that joke already. You don't need to use the third or fourth time. So some jokes do get a little old after a while, unfortunately. And I also thought the use of Valkyrie in the film was also very weak. Love Tessa Thompson, love the way she's playing the character. How they incorporated her into this story, I thought was just not very good. I thought Valkyrie could have been given more to do based on what they gave her to do in Thor Ragnarok and how significant she is to that franchise. Would have liked to have seen her incorporated a little bit better into the story this time. And for the most part, some of the action scenes are pretty non-memorable. There's just a lot of action where I remember what happened. I remember what happened in the story and everything like that. But there's not like a Terminator 2 canal chase. There's not the Dark Knight Batpod chase. There's not like a significant action scene that pops out so much. It's like that's the scene that makes Thor: Love and Thunder so great. There's just not that big action scene where you're just like, that's exactly what I needed right now. That's exactly what the Thor franchise needed. So action-wise, the film is pretty lackluster in that department. But overall, I'm going to give Thor: Love and Thunder an 8.5 out of 10. I think it's very enjoyable. I think it's a great addition to the Thor franchise. Could have toned down the comedy a little bit, obviously. Tons of great things going for it, though. Obviously, Christian Bale is great as Gorr, and the visual effects are great, and Taika Waititi really adds a lot to his movies. But there's just enough negatives here where it's just not the best of the franchise. And I just don't think there's a lot of people, based on my experience, that are going to view this as the best of the franchise. I think that title still belongs to Thor Ragnarok. But I am going to give the film an 8.5 out of 10. I could send you to the theater to see this one. It's good enough where there's just enough good things in it that I think you'll enjoy it. It gets a recommendation from me, 8.5 out of 10. Just go in knowing that it's not going to be the best Thor adventure that's out there for the Marvel films right now.